He was a millionaire who didn't trust love, cold, calculated, and completely untouchable. But everything changed the moment he saw a nurse make his dying grandfather smile for the first time in weeks. That single moment shattered his walls and led him to the one thing money could never buy. From the outside, Ethan Reed's life looked like something out of a dream. He was young, wildly successful, and wealthy beyond imagination. At 34, he had already sold 2 tech startups, invested in major corporations, and was now running his third company, which had just hit a billion-dollar valuation. His face had graced magazine covers. Reporters called him a visionary, and Forbes listed him in their top 10 most eligible bachelors for 3 years in a row. His downtown penthouse overlooked the skyline. He drove a sleek black Lamborghini on weekdays, a vintage Rolls-Royce on weekends, and a private driver waited downstairs 24/7. He dined in places most people only saw in movies, and he wore suits tailored in London, flown in by private jet. There were luxury trips, yacht parties, and celebrity events. People admired him. Envy followed him. Everyone wanted to be him. But behind all of that, behind the money, the charm, the headlines, was a truth Ethan never spoke about. He was alone, deeply, quietly alone. From a young age, Ethan believed that love came with strings attached. It was something people used, especially women, to get close to what he had. He learned that lesson the hard way. When he was just 20 and building his first startup in a college dorm room, he fell for a girl named Kayla. She seemed sweet, interested, supportive. But after his company took off and money started flowing, he caught her messaging his co-founder, bragging about how she'd secured her future. That betrayal left a permanent scar. After that, he made a silent vow: never fall in love again. Women came and went. Models, influencers, even fellow entrepreneurs. Some were genuine, many weren't. But even the good ones never got past the wall he had built. He kept things casual, distant, guarded. They could dine with him, laugh with him, even sleep beside him, but never get in. Ethan didn't let anyone in. Whenever people asked why he wasn't married yet, he gave the same answer: I'm not built for love. I build companies. That's my thing. But in the quiet hours after the parties ended and the city lights dimmed, Ethan would sit alone in his penthouse, sipping whiskey and scrolling through old photos of his childhood. One face appeared over and over again: his grandfather, William Reed. William had raised him after Ethan's parents died in a tragic car crash when Ethan was just 10. The man had been his rock, his guide, his everything. A former soldier with a tough exterior and a soft heart, Grandpa William taught him how to ride a bike, how to shake hands firmly, how to treat people with respect, even when they didn't deserve it. But even more than that, Grandpa had always said something Ethan had never forgotten. Son, money can build an empire, but love builds a life. Don't forget the difference. Back then, Ethan didn't understand it. Now, as a powerful man with the world at his feet, those words echoed louder than ever. Still, he brushed it off, focused on work, numbers, deals, logic, until a phone call changed everything. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Ethan's assistant rushed into his office, her face pale. Ethan, it's your grandfather. He's in the hospital. It's serious. The world slowed down. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't care about meetings or contracts. He canceled everything, jumped in his car, and sped toward the hospital. The sight of his once strong grandfather hooked up to machines, frail and weak, brought him to his knees. I'm here, Grandpa, he whispered, gripping the old man's hand. I'm here. That moment shifted something inside him. Suddenly, the money didn't matter. The fame felt hollow. The power felt useless. All that mattered was this man, and the time they had left. Ethan didn't know it yet, but that hospital room, where monitors beeped and hope hung by a thread, was where he would finally confront the emptiness he had buried for years. And it would be the place where he met someone who would challenge everything he believed about love. The hospital room was cold, sterile, and filled with the sound of quiet beeping machines, each beep a reminder that time was running out. Ethan sat in the corner, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor tiles. He had been there for hours, maybe days. He lost track. His phone buzzed constantly. Emails from investors, updates from his executive assistant, text messages from people who suddenly remembered they cared. He ignored them all. His grandfather, the strongest man he had ever known, lay frail and barely conscious in a hospital bed. Tubes ran into his arms. His skin was pale. His eyes fluttered open only for a few seconds at a time. Ethan had seen a lot in his life. Hostile takeovers, courtroom battles, press scandals, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing broke him like watching his hero slowly fade away. Doctors had told him the truth. There was no cure, just comfort. It was late-stage cancer. Aggressive, unforgiving. They said the best they could do was make William Reed's final days as peaceful as possible. But peace felt impossible. Ethan was used to solving problems, throwing money at them, hiring the best experts, fixing things. But this couldn't be fixed. This was the one thing money couldn't stop. The nurses came in and out of the room with polite smiles and soft voices. They did their jobs well, efficient, kind, professional. But it all felt routine, mechanical, until she walked in. Her name was Sophia. She entered quietly, wearing blue scrubs, a name badge, and a messy ponytail. There was something different about her presence, something gentle yet strong. She didn't move like the others. She didn't just do her job, she lived it. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," she said warmly, placing a hand gently on Grandpa's shoulder. "I hear you used to dance in the kitchen when you were younger. True or false?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. What kind of nurse asks a dying man about dancing? To his surprise, his grandfather gave a weak, raspy chuckle. "Only when no one was looking," he croaked. Sophia grinned. "I knew it. I can tell by the way you tap your foot to the jazz music." She pulled out a small speaker from her bag and played soft jazz. Miles Davis, maybe. The music filled the room with something Ethan hadn't felt in days. Warmth. For the next 30 minutes, she chatted with Grandpa like he was an old friend. She didn't talk down to him. She didn't pity him. She made him feel human. She asked about his army stories, joked about his stubbornness, fluffed his pillows like a caring granddaughter, and laughed with him like they had known each other for years. Ethan watched in stunned silence. He had been by his grandfather's side for days, trying to bring him comfort with gifts, special food, even a private hospital room. But none of that made the old man light up the way he did when Sophia was there. When she left the room, Grandpa whispered, "She reminds me of your grandmother. Feisty, kind." Ethan looked at the door. "She's just a nurse, Grandpa." "No, son," the old man said, smiling faintly. "She's a healer." Those words stuck with Ethan. The next morning, Sophia came again. This time, Ethan stood when she entered. "Good morning," he said. She glanced at him, slightly surprised. "Morning. How's he feeling?" "Better when you're around," Ethan admitted. Sophia gave a modest smile and got to work, chatting with Grandpa again, making him laugh, and playing music. Ethan stayed quiet, listening, observing. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about quarterly earnings or news articles or stock prices. He was thinking about her. Who was this woman who walked into a room full of pain and somehow brought peace? Over the next few days, Ethan began asking questions, small ones at first. Where she was from, why she became a nurse, what she did outside of work. She answered kindly, but never flirted, never acted impressed by who he was or what he had. In fact, she barely reacted when he casually mentioned he ran a tech company. It was like she didn't care, and that intrigued him. He had spent years surrounded by people who faked interest just to gain something. But Sophia was different. She wasn't interested in his wealth. She was interested in people. Ethan didn't know it yet, but watching her in that hospital room was the beginning of something that would completely dismantle everything he thought he knew about love, about connection, and about himself. What began as grief and helplessness was quietly turning into awe. And awe, if left long enough, always grows into something deeper. It happened on a Thursday morning, one of those gray, rainy days when even the sun seemed too tired to rise. Ethan walked into the hospital room with a fresh cup of black coffee, eyes heavy from another sleepless night. He had stayed up thinking about everything, his grandfather, mortality, and, strangely, Sophia. Something about her lingered in his mind like the final note of a beautiful song. As he neared the door, He stopped. He heard laughter. Real laughter. Not the weak chuckles his grandfather gave to be polite. This was different, warm, full-bodied, joyful. Ethan peeked through the slightly open door and froze. Inside, Sophia was sitting beside his grandfather's bed, wearing a ridiculous pair of fuzzy cat ears on her head. Grandpa was wiping tears from his eyes, tears from laughing so hard. She was teasing him, mimicking how he marched in the military, exaggerated like a cartoon soldier. Then she switched her voice to an old-timey radio announcer, saying, "Private William Reed reporting for duty, sir," with a side of mashed potatoes. Grandpa erupted in laughter again, wheezing, his frail hand clutching his stomach. Ethan couldn't move. It had been weeks since he'd seen that smile. That real smile, the one that lifted Grandpa's whole face, made his eyes crinkle, made him look like himself again. In that moment, the air shifted. Time slowed. The wall Ethan had spent years building, brick by cold, careful brick, began to crack. This nurse, this stranger, had done what Ethan couldn't. She had brought his grandfather back to life. Not literally, but emotionally, spiritually. Just for a few minutes, she made him feel like himself again. And that broke something in Ethan. Not in a painful way, in a necessary way. After Sophia left the room, Grandpa turned to Ethan and whispered, "She's a light, that one." Ethan sat beside the bed, still stunned. "She's incredible. I haven't laughed like that since your grandmother was alive," Grandpa said, his voice soft but clear. Ethan looked down. "I don't know how she does it." "Because she sees people," Grandpa said. "Not their money, not their pain, just their humanity." Those words hit Ethan like a freight train. For so long, Ethan had hidden behind power, status, wealth. He had believed that no one could see him for who he really was, not without an agenda. He had become so used to being used, so trained to doubt every intention, that he forgot what genuine looked like. But Sophia? She saw people in a way he had forgotten was even possible. Later that day, Ethan tried to thank her in his usual way by doing something grand. He had an assistant send a bouquet of rare imported roses to the nurse's station with a thank you note signed in his name. The kind of gesture that would have most women texting him back within minutes. But Sophia? She sent them back with a handwritten note. "Thank you, Mr. Reed, but I'm not comfortable accepting gifts from patients' families. I'm just doing my job." Sophia, beside the hospital bed, holding his grandfather's hand. His throat ached from holding back tears, his jaw clenched tightly. And Sophia, gentle, steady Sophia, was standing on the other side, her hand resting softly over Mr. Reed's frail chest. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, eyes glistening. William Reed, the man who had raised Ethan, protected him, and shaped him, had just taken his final breath. Peacefully, quietly, with no pain, surrounded by love. Ethan had always feared this moment. But somehow, in the presence of Sophia, it felt bearable. It felt safe. He didn't cry right away. Not there. Not then. Instead, he looked at his grandfather's face, still calm, with a faint trace of a smile left behind. And Ethan knew he hadn't just lost a grandfather. He had lost the only person who ever truly understood him. Until now, Sophia reached over and gently placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. She didn't say a word. She didn't try to comfort him with cliches. She just stood there, offering quiet strength. And it was exactly what he needed. In the days that followed, Ethan planned the funeral with meticulous care. Black cars, crisp suits, military honors, everything William Reed deserved. But something inside him had shifted. Everything felt different now. The money, the fame, the legacy, it all seemed smaller in the face of death. And in the wake of that final goodbye, all Ethan could think about was her. Sophia, the woman who had brought light into the darkest room of his life. The woman who had shown his grandfather more love and dignity in 2 weeks than many people receive in a lifetime. Ethan couldn't ignore what he was feeling anymore. So, a week after the funeral, he called her. "Would you meet me for coffee?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. There was a pause on the other end, then a soft yes. They met at a small cafe, tucked away on a quiet street. No bodyguards, no designer clothes. Just Ethan, in jeans and a plain hoodie, and Sophia, in a simple dress with her hair in a bun. "I just wanted to say thank you," Ethan began, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup, "for what you did for him, and for me." Sophia looked up. "You don't have to thank me. He was easy to love." Ethan smiled, his eyes misting. "You made his last days better than I ever could. And you showed me something I didn't know I was missing." Sophia tilted her head, curious. "What's that?" "Real love," he said. "Not the kind in stories. The kind that doesn't care what you have or who you are. The kind that sits beside you when you're broken and doesn't try to fix you, just holds your hand." There was a silence between them, not uncomfortable, just full of everything unsaid. "I know I'm not perfect," Ethan continued. "I've made mistakes. I've kept people out. But I don't want to live like that anymore. I don't want to hide." He looked into her eyes. "I want to try with you." Sophia was quiet. Then she smiled, genuine, warm, and a little nervous. "I'd like that," she said softly. "But no roses. No grand gestures." Ethan chuckled. "No roses. Just coffee." "Just coffee," she nodded. Over the months that followed, their bond grew naturally, without pressure or pretense. They walked through parks, cooked together, stayed in on rainy days. No headlines, no drama. Ethan let Sophia see sides of him no one else ever had. The scared boy who lost his parents, the driven young man who buried himself in work, the lonely adult who thought love wasn't meant for him. And in return, Sophia gave him space to breathe, to be human, to heal. A year later, on the anniversary of his grandfather's passing, Ethan brought Sophia to the hospital garden where she used to sit on her breaks. Under the same tree where his grandfather once watched the sunset, Ethan knelt on one knee and pulled out a simple ring. No diamonds, no flash, just gold and intention. "I don't have a speech," he said. "Just one truth. You made me believe again. And I don't want a future that doesn't have you in it." Sophia's eyes welled up with tears. She nodded, smiling through them. "Yes." And just like that, the man who once rejected every form of love, who believed it was all fake, transactional, temporary, finally found the real thing. Not in a mansion, not at a gala, not in power or fame, but in a hospital room with a nurse who made his grandfather smile before he said goodbye. That moment stunned Ethan more than any business deal ever had. He wasn't angry. He was intrigued. Who was this woman? In a world where everyone seemed to want something, here was someone who wanted nothing except to do the right thing. Ethan began arriving earlier, hoping to catch her before her rounds. He asked about her favorite music, what she liked to read, what brought her joy. Every answer she gave was simple, grounded, thoughtful. She loved old books, black coffee, rainy days. She volunteered on weekends at a retirement home. And when he asked why she chose nursing, her answer was honest and unpolished. "Because when my mom was dying, I saw one nurse treat her like she still mattered. I wanted to be that for someone else." That sentence lingered in Ethan's mind for days. Here was someone who didn't just do kindness, she lived it. And slowly, without warning, Ethan began to feel something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Vulnerability. For the first time in over a decade, he wanted to open up, not to impress, not to gain anything, just to connect. He found himself caring about what she thought. He replayed her words in his head. He looked forward to seeing her, just to hear her laugh, to see how his grandfather's face lit up when she walked into the room. It scared him, this feeling, but also felt right, because when he saw his grandfather smile that day, something inside him woke up. It was the beginning of a shift, a quiet unraveling, a door slowly creaking open, and behind that door was something Ethan had spent his entire life running from. Love, real love. Ethan Reed was used to turning heads. He walked into rooms, and people stood straighter, smiled wider, and spoke more carefully. From corporate offices to exclusive clubs, people knew who he was, or at least who they thought he was, the millionaire genius, the tech mogul, the golden boy. But in that hospital hallway, standing across from a nurse with tired eyes and a calm voice, none of that mattered. Sophia didn't care. Not once did she ask about his company, his wealth, or his life outside that hospital. She treated him no differently than she treated Mr. Alvarez in room 302, who didn't even have family to visit him. It threw Ethan off balance. He was used to a certain pattern. Charm a little, name drop lightly, offer subtle hints of who he was, and people would lean in. They'd try to impress him, offer compliments, find a way to stay in his orbit. Sophia? She barely blinked. When Ethan asked if she wanted to grab a coffee from the cafe downstairs, she smiled and replied gently, "Thanks, but I have 3 more patients to check on. Maybe some other time." He wasn't offended. He was fascinated. She wasn't rude. She wasn't playing hard to get. She was simply uninterested in his status. She cared more about her patients than his pedigree, and that made her stand out more than any woman he'd ever met. The next day, Ethan came in early again. This time, he brought 2 coffees and left one at the nurse's station with a sticky note that read, "For someone who's always on her feet." He didn't sign it. He didn't expect anything. But later that afternoon, Sophia walked into his grandfather's room holding the cup. "You didn't have to do that," she said, raising an eyebrow. "But thanks." Ethan just nodded, hiding the fact that his heart skipped slightly just seeing her smile. They started talking more. A few minutes here and there, between her rounds, during quiet moments. It was never romantic, never flirty. Just real, honest conversation. And Ethan found himself saying things he hadn't said in years. Like how his parents died when he was 10. How his grandfather became his rock. How he built walls because trust was dangerous. How every woman he dated seemed more interested in what he had than who he was. Sophia listened. Really listened. She didn't interrupt. Didn't judge. She just let the silence breathe when it needed to and filled it with kindness when it got too heavy. Then one day, she asked something no one else ever had. "Do you ever get tired of pretending to be strong all the time?" Ethan froze. He hadn't realized it until then, but yes. He was tired. Exhausted even. Tired of being the man with the answers. Tired of hiding his loneliness behind luxury. Tired of being admired but never truly seen. And Sophia saw him. Not the polished image. Not the brand. Not the myth. She saw the man beneath the surface, flawed, guarded, hurting. That realization both scared and healed him at the same time. What made it even more powerful was this. Sophia had no idea who he really was. One evening, as they sat in the hospital lobby for a short break, Ethan mentioned something about a feature article he'd been in. Sophia gave him a curious look. "Wait, Ethan Reed? You're that Ethan Reed?" He nodded sheepishly. Sophia blinked, then shrugged. "I mean, I knew your name sounded familiar. But honestly, it doesn't change anything." And she meant it. She wasn't suddenly starstruck. She didn't start asking questions about his cars or his companies. She just sipped her coffee and smiled like she always did. "You're still just Ethan to me. The guy who brings coffee and loves his grandpa," she said. That moment hit him harder than any deal he'd ever closed.